Hey everybody, it's Best with our Expedition tier list for patches 1, 2.1, and 2.2. If we always do a little bit of introduction here, so if you just want to skip straight down to where we talk about the tier lists and the changes and what's happening and what's not, you can go down to the description and there'll be a link to skip right to it. But, to start with the first three things I like to call out when it comes to these tier lists, I do it for 2 patches in a row with the way that Riot sets up their patches. There's basically a big patch and a little patch. And so 2.1 was the big patch. This was their release of the Aphelios Champion Expansion. And then the 2.2 patch should be a small one. They tend to just make a few tweaks to cards. They may make a small change or two to a card pool, but it's nothing big enough to warrant going and changing what already exists in the tier list and making a new video for it. And so, if some big changes do happen in the 2.2 patch, I'll surely go out here and make a new video. But as it stands, I would suspect this tier list should be good for the next 3-4 weeks or so until the new set comes out. The second thing I like to talk about is I tend to look at these tier lists as using the pool for what it's intended to do. And so if we take a look at something like Afterlife Callista, this is either supposed to be a Mistrace deck or it's supposed to get some kind of value out of killing your own units. Over here with the Discipline Z, it tends to be an elusives deck that also focuses on buffing the size of the units in your hand. And so when we look at some of these card pools, they are very useful. Like if we want to go and take a look at something like Solar Winds Yasuo, the real intent of Solar Winds Yasuo is it's supposed to be paired up with Targon, and you're supposed to be a stun-centric deck. This is just not very good. And so I feel like if I go out there and put out, that Solar Winds Yasuo is actually it's kind of like a tier 2.5 deck. You go out and you draft it up with Targon, you pick up a whole bunch of stuns, and then you immediately go like 1 and 2. That's not what I'm trying to get out of this. And so this, Solar Winds Yasuo is a very good card pool if you're looking to draft elusives. But that is not the intent of the card pool, so it's way down here at tier 5 because the intent is to draft a stun deck with Leona. And then the last thing I like to call out is, for the most part, I look at these as being a build-around. And so what we're trying to specifically do with the deck in regards to that champion. And so we see something like Afterlife Callista. We're going to draft 3 Callistas. We're going to try to pick up some Blighted Caretakers and really focus on flipping Callista and doing what Afterlife is good at doing. The reason we call this out is if we scroll down to the bottom, we see things like the Maokais. There's a lot of decks that really love having Maokai. They want to go and pick up a couple Blighted Caretakers, a couple removal spells, maybe an Everglade Collector or 2, and be done with it. Ancient Evo Maokai is just not worth building around. Terrors from the Deep Maokai is not worth building around. These are not good build-around card pools with what we look to lay out with the tier list here. As far as supporting card pools go, these are most certainly tier 1, but that's a different kind of video, a different kind of strategy. And so, if we're looking at something like Frozen Solid Ash, if we're really just trying to build around Frozen Solid Ash, then, she's kind of tier 3. We might get a good deck together. If things go well, we'll probably take it to 7 wins. If the specific cards we're looking for don't show up, we'll probably peter out around 3. But, there are a lot of card pools that are super excited to have this Frozen Solid Ash, whether or not that be a Noxcria Arena-based Darius, if it's like a Sejuani and we're trying to build a Avrosian Outriders build-around, then she shoots straight up to tier 1, right? But that's for a supporting role and not a build-around role. So I do like to call out these 3 things right at the beginning of every video. This should be good for the next 2 patches. We're looking at whatever the intent of the card pool is, and then looking to actually specifically build around the intent of that card pool. Then, the next thing I like to call out is with the 2.1 changes. This was the release of the Aphelios expansion. And so there were, I believe, like 10 new cards, maybe 15 new cards added, most of them focused on Nightfall, most of them focused on Aphelios. And so that was the big change here. We've got Aphelios in tier 2. We'll talk about him a little bit later, but that's where we're at with this expansion. This was the release of the Aphelios Champion Expansion. And in my opinion, much bigger than Aphelios, but the big release out of this expansion was the Cloven Way. That is the 5-cost Nightfall unit, stuns a unit for 2 turns. It's 5/4 Overwhelm. Very, very powerful unit. Really shapes up and fixes a lot of the problems that we saw in the Nightfall decks. And so the last big thing coming out of this expansion was in the patch notes. They did apply the nerf to the Grand Plaza. The Grand Plaza just gives the Challenger and +1 attack. And so, the big considerations into this were, basically seeing a bunch of Nightfall things happening, the addition of the Cloven Way, the addition of Aphelios, the one attack taken off of Pale Cascade, and then the big change was the real weakening to Demacia with the Grand Plaza getting nerfed across the board. And so, before we do dive into the tier list, I do want to say that there are quite a few unrecorded changes on the patch notes for the 2.1 patch. I did go through and compile all of them, I do believe. I dedicated a video to this in the past and no one watched it, so I just don't feel the need to just make an entire video around it. But I did go and record all of the changes that happened. And so even some of these, like with the addition of Flurry of Fists to Discipline Z, this was, kind of an Aphelios card, so it wasn't shown. But there were no notes for Zed in the patch 2.1 thing, and so you didn't get to see that Homecoming was added and a humongous change in Sown Seeds being removed. And so, I did tend to go through all of these in the past. I do want to call out some highlights in here as far as, Zed catching a real upgrade. The Spellslinger's Fizz is trying to become an elusive stack based out of Bilgewater. And then, the big thing that Riot did throughout the list here was they went through and removed a bunch of cards. And like a Magic background, we would call them skill testers, right? These are cards that are not particularly good. But, it kind of looks like it could do something neat. So the big ones from this set were like Pesky Spectre. They took Pesky Spectre out of a lot of decks. And then the other big one was Monkey Business that they took out of a lot of decks. These cards were, pretty much strictly unplayable. They were horrible cards to include in any of your expedition decks. But, it's kind of like I do like that they exist to some degree, but I want them to exist where they thematically make sense. And so we did see in a lot of card pools that both Pesky Spectre and Monkey Business were added across the board. That's kind of crappy. There's a lot of card pools that don't really want these. I get that there's a tough balance between getting the new cards out there in Expedition so that we can play with them and just kind of doing things like that make sense, but just some of these cards are completely horrible, Pesky Spectre being a big one. And so I don't mind that these exist, right? I do like that these are here. Now they really just live within Afterlife Callista, and it at least makes a little bit of sense there, right? You can say you play your Pesky Spectre. It's an easy way to have a unit just come out and die, so you can level up your Callista with it. There are some kill your own unit combos, which work pretty well with the Pesky Spectre. But, this is a pretty horrible card. I would assume that most people that are into Expedition enough to go out and watch tier list videos understand that Pesky Spectre is not a good card. And so, I'm glad that they really went and removed a lot of these from a lot of the card pools, but did kind of leave them littered about. So, if you're kind of new to the game or new to Expedition or new to card games in general, you do have that skill tester out there to go and try to experiment and find ways to use. Kind of the same thing applies with Monkey Business. If they want to leave it around with some of the Gangplanks or some of the Plunder decks, then sure, gives you a way to kind of guarantee to hit a Plunder out in without being in combat, gives you a way to hit a plunder on your opponent's turn. There's things you can do with it, but it is just really awkward and completely horrible. And so, the last thing I wanted to call out here is, they did make some pretty big changes to Luminous Dusk and Moonlit Heist. These are the Diana decks. They basically went and added all of the rares that were added in the new set, and then removed some of the gem themes. And so they took Stargazers out of both pools. They took Shards of the Mountain out. Gift Giver no longer lives here, although the real champion in Mountain Goat still is still all over the place. And they went and added all of these cards to Diana. And so, I just wanted to be able to kind of scroll through this a little quickly. There are just a lot of stealth changes that don't get noted in the patch notes. And so if you're one of those people that wants to see these things, I'll give it another real quick scroll through. You can, pause the video or whatever you need to do to take a quick peek at these. But, if the only place that they're going to be recorded is in this video, I would like to go out and share them with everyone. Okay. Almost there. Not a whole lot of them. And I'm pretty sure these were all good. There can, of course, be something that I just missed over the course of updating the site, but the real strange one to me was on Nautilus and having the Bayou Brunch in the Nautilus card pool. It's so incredibly terrible of a card. It has no thematic sense as far as sea monsters are concerned, but it's just living there in one of the terrible card pools. But nonetheless, we're back here. I do want to go through each of the tiers and talk about some of the changes that we made. Up in Tier 1, I did move Grand Moments Lux from Tier 1 down into Tier 2, push Nocturne back up into Tier 1. And so, my real commentary on this card pool is I do keep wanting to pull these Callistas out, but it's just so easy to get a super strong 7-win Callista deck. If you just manage to go and pick up 2 or 3 Blighted Caretakers, 1 or 2 Neverglade Collectors, and then 1 or 2 the Rekindlers, and then you just put together, some removal spells in a curve that isn't horrible, you are just so set to take this straight up to a 7-win. Like, Callista is so powerful, the Blighted Caretakers are so powerful, the combo of, rekindling back Callistas just lets you stand up to pretty much any late game, and it's just such a completely set of powerful set of cards. And then not to mention that Afterlife also has the Mistrace theme in it, which is the easiest 7-win package you can put together if you're out here high rolling just a little bit. And so, that's why we do tend to see the Callistas stick around. It's just such an incredibly easy card pool to put together a 7-winner. The card pools are abysmally terrible, right? There's a ton of horrible cards within both of these Callista card pools. I don't think there's any other set of cards that have more cards that I list as do not draft as these card pools, but she still sits up in Tier 1 because it is just so easy to put together an extremely powerful Callista deck. Many similar things down here with the Nocturne. The Black Mist Nocturne is probably the easiest card pool in the game to send yourself to 7. If you see the Black Mist show up, you try to pair it together with another Shadow Isles champion. Just draft every card that you see that says Mistwraith, and you should be right on your way to 7. Incredibly easy card pool to be building around. And then, as far as these other ones, they're still just incredibly good. Both Lee Sins are extremely good. Both the Zed decks are extremely good. Retribution Lucian still extremely good, as long as you compare him up with Shadow Isles. And then last but not least, the only kind of control deck that I, in my mind, can really sit around up in Tier 1 is Tahm Kench. He is just extremely good. If if you're new to Runeterra and but have a lot of experience, playing limited in card games, if you have a card that generates a removal spell every turn of the game, you're gonna be stoked to pick that up, right? In the limited formats, we spend so much time talking about removal spells and how bad a removal spell can be, where we just still play it. If you're willing to play a card that gives you a removal spell every turn of the game that can kill any unit, you are just on board and ready to go. And so Mending Touch Tahm Kench still gets to hang out up here in Tier 1. So then, as we move down into Tier 2, this is where we kind of find the rest of the good control decks, all of our Aurelian Souls, all of our Leonas, and then the drop of Lux down into Tier 2. All of these, with the Tier 1, I find it just to be, super easy to go to 7 wins. Things have to go extremely bad for your draft to not have a deck that you can get to 7 with. With Tier 2, it's a little bit worse. These are ones that we can easily craft an Aurelian Soul deck that doesn't find a removal spell. We can craft a Leona deck that doesn't find any Zenith Blades or Daybreak Invokes. And so these can go kind of wrong. If things go right, then you're going to cruise to 7, is the way I kind of look at these Tier 2 strategies. But, it's much easier for things to go wrong with these than it is for the Tier 1s. And so, all of the remaining good control decks are up here, our Aurelian Souls, our Leonas, our Lux. And then, the remainder of the aggro decks. The Riven is still extremely powerful. She did catch a couple of buffs in this patch. Felt like they did not need to happen for Expedition. They were constructed level concerns to where the 1-drop Reforge now has 2 attack, and then the big Riven Sword now costs 1 mana. And so, in much of the same way we talk about Callista just needing a very few specific cards to have an incredibly powerful deck, and much in the same vein with Riven, if you just go and draft the 2 Reforge units as aggressively as possible, you're going to end up with an extremely strong deck. The Riven Sword and a Flipped Riven are going to be good to get, at least 2 wins in the trial for you. It's such an incredibly powerful early game package. And then the Reforges open up so many combos and so many other pools, whether or not you're trying to do things with puff caps, or you're trying to do things with Scrap Heap where you're discarding cards, you're trying to do things with augments. There's just so many powerful things you can do with these Reforges that the Riven is extremely powerful and extremely easy to put together a 7-win deck. And then over here with the Dianas, I hinted quite a bit to the Cloven Way. The big thing that we had, the big problems we had with Diana where she has extremely good early game. She has the best 1, 2, and 3 drop packages in the game, but then her card pool doesn't have any interaction in it outside of the Pale Cascade. And so, she really struggled to find a home for, the mid and the late game. She just needed a little bit of work to get there. You typically had to play things like Eclipse Dragons, which is fine, but it's not really a good aggro closer. Or you had to hope that you found things like the 5/3 for 6 that gives units elusive. And so, the big problem with both of the Diana pools was that she just had that little bit of trouble closing out games, and the Cloven Way is just actual everything that she's been looking for. It's a 5 attack overwhelm. It's able to slow down one of your opponent's units. You can set up these plays to where, you stun stun a unit on your opponent's turn. It stays stunned on your turn, so you have a humongous open attack to close out a game with, and it just has Nightfall. And so everything that Diana was looking for, in a late game card and a removal spell and an additional Nightfall outlet, she found in the Cloven Way. And is just an extremely, extremely powerful addition. Very easily pushed her up into the realm of being in tier 2. And then, much in the same vein, Aphelios is an extremely strong champion. He's not, as strong of a late game as an Aurelian Soul, but he is going to take over any late game. He can even start out in the mid game being a removal spell, and then as he just sits around and goes through his chain of spells, it's just incredibly, incredibly powerful. The thing that we tend to look to do with Aphelios is play the 3 damage removal spell, play the 2-turn stun, and then play the thing that puts a 2-drop from your deck into play. And then just running that chain over and over again is incredibly, incredibly powerful in Expedition. And so, kind of the big deal with Aphelios as well is, this Luminous Dust card pool is so extremely early game centric, much in the same vein that we are excited to pick up the Cloven Way for Diana. Aphelios is a great late game closer. You can just, really just pick 1, 2s, and 3 drops throughout the entirety of the draft, and then know that you can put 2 Aphelioses in your deck, and then your late game is completely covered for. And so, all in all, right here at the end of these cards from the Aphelios Champion Expansion really boosted all of the Nightfall decks up. That's why we're seeing, Black Mist and Luminous Dusk Nocturne up in tier 1, and then both Diana's and Aphelios down here in tier 2. Nightfall is just extremely, extremely powerful. And I did want to call out that, if we're looking, I don't want to, blame it on power creep or just the strength of Targon in general, but, the Targon's doing real good here at the end of the expansion with, both Nocturnes and Tom Kench being up in tier 1. So we got 30% of our tier 1 being cards from the new expansion, and then just 90% of tier 2, all cards from Targon or cards from the Call of the Mountain expansion. And so extremely, extremely powerful things happening here. Lots of good stuff happening as far as the new cards are concerned. And so down here in tier 3, with the addition of things up in tier 2, some things had to come back down. That has been, unfortunately, the downfall of Shroom and Boom and Total Recall Teemo. It's still extremely good, but, he can run into some problems. If your opponent's able to interact with Teemo early, you can kind of fail if you never draw your Teemos. We don't really count on Teemo to win the game, but if he's dealt with early, it just gives your opponent a ton of time. And you can have some kind of like awkward decks come together where, you end up having like 5 Puffcat Peddlers and not enough early game. Since these are extremely good, I do typically feel like more of our Teemo decks can hit 7 than less of them. But, he's much, much weaker than a Luminous Dust Diana. And so, if I'm offered up a Pack 1 Luminous Dust Diana or a Shroom and Boom Teemo, which of those do I feel like is going to be more likely to get me to 7 wins? 100% and without a doubt, it's Luminous Dust Diana. And so I think that was a very easy push to have her come up here. So both Dianas got pushed up. The Luminous Dust Aphelios got pushed up, and then the 2 Total Recalls got pushed down. The only other change out of tier 3 here, where we pushed the Vault of Crowns Thresh down to tier 5. It's just, this pool used to be worth taking just for the sense that the Grand Plaza was so incredibly powerful. You are willing to play such a horrible card pool just for the fact that the Grand Plaza was so strong. Now that the Grand Plaza has been nerfed, the Vault of Crowns pushes way down. It's just not nearly as good. The Garen is still reasonable. It's got a lot of powerful cards in the Garen between Grizzled Ranger and Remembrance, Radiant Guardian. I can't remember her name. The unit that gets tough and Lifesteal is just both of the combos that work well with the Vaults of Helia and the Grand Plaza live in the Garen side. All of the kind of kill your own units theme that lives down here in the Thresh, just not particularly good. You're never going to build around this Thresh because the strategies here are pretty bad. And so, the Vault of Crowns Thresh did get pushed down. We also moved the Ancient Evil back up into tier 3. This pool has just kind of grown stronger and stronger and stronger. It combats the Nightfall strategies extremely well, combats the Mist Wraith strategies extremely well. Just having access to the Yeti makers. These are a lot of decks have an incredibly tough time dealing with the 5/5 Yetis, and so the Ancient Evil early game of Omen Hawks, the Yeti generating Last Breath, and then the Avarician Trapper. It just functions extremely well, running into a lot of these tier 1 strategies, right? They play extremely well against Callistas, they play extremely well against Nocturnes, and so it's been able to push Ancient Evil Tryndamere back up. I'd even be willing to draft multiple copies of Tryndamere against a lot of these decks. And so, yeah, that is kind of the extent of it. So if we want to click up here and just kind of recap really quick, the Callistas are still holding on. I want to push them down, but they're still very strong. Zed is still holding on very strong here. The top tier control deck strategy is the Mending Touch Tom Kench, and then we have the Mist Wraith strategies and the Blast Mist, the other Blighted Caretaker strategies and the Retribution Lucian, and then kind of our combo strategies down here with our Lee Sin. Our big moves into tier 2, Lux went down a bit. All of our Nightfall decks went up a bit. The strength of the Riven changes, the upgrade to her sword, the upgrade to her 1-drop kept her in tier 2, and then of course Aurelion Soul, still a very strong control strategy. Not too many changes down here in tier 3. We moved the Vault of Crowns Thresh down into tier 5. We pushed Ancient Evil Tryndamere back up, and then Shroom and Boom, Total Recall, and Arachnophilia came in to fill in the slots that were weakened by the addition of the Nightfall strategies. But that is going to be your tier list for you for patch 2.1 and 2.2. Hope you all enjoyed. Agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments with what you think, or if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them down there as well. But glad to have you here. This is Bust, and thanks for checking out our tier list.